Hello, this is Keith Owen. Welcome back. Today's tutorial is going to be based upon you may be given a task as a data analyst where you need to you have an Excel file and you need to separate certain data from that file, and then maybe you'll need to once you create that separate file with the criteria that you select, you will then email that off to the proper person to look at. So today's tutorial, you're going to learn to be able to do that integrating Excel and Python. So this data set that we're looking at, it's roughly approximately 10,000 rows, like 9,800 rows. And you could see that it's got various different data fields in it. And basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to take the task of separating this data based upon this segment column here. In this segment column, let's do a Control Shift L to bring up the filter, and then Alt down arrow that will select, that will basically show you all the values, unique values within this particular column. So we got three different segments, and one's consumer, one's corporate, and one's home office. So what we want to do is extract all the consumer segments, all the home office segments, etc., into separate files. So since there's three different segments, we're going to create three different Excel files. And each file is going to contain only the data that is associated with that particular segment. And we're going to be doing this all using Python. So let's go over to Python, and what I'm using is Jupyter Notebooks as my IDE, Integrated Development Environment. So our first step is we need to import the necessary libraries in order to execute what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to press B to insert a new cell below the top cell, and I'm going to be typing in, we're going to be using pandas as PD, press enter, and then we're also going to be using the OS module, import OS. Okay, control enter. Okay, that executes the current cell. And now our next step is we want to be able to create a file variable to hold the Excel file that we're going to be using. So we're going to go down to the next cell, press B to insert a new cell, and then we're going to type in, you could call this anything that you want, a variable name. I'm just calling it Excel file equal to, and then put in quotes the name of your file. And in my case, it's Superstore sales data .xlsx. Control enter. And now our next step is we want to create a variable name to hold the name of the Excel column that we want to split data by. In other words, let's go back to the Excel file, and let's see, and again, it's going to read in this file. Python will read in this file, and then we're going to give it the name of the column that we want to split the data by. And in this particular case, it's called segments. So let's go back to Python, and then let's see. Let's press B to enter in a new cell. And then we're just going to call this segment column. Again, this is, you call this variable name whatever that you want. and then we're gonna type in an exact name, and capitalization is important. It is case sensitive. Okay. So we did that. Now our next step is, let's see, we want to be, at the end of this, we want to create a new directory. We could do it in the same directory as this file is being executed. I just choose to put it in a new directory, and we're going to create a directory name that will store the separate files, meaning we're going to be creating 3 different separate Excel files, each containing the data for each segment. Okay, so we're going to create that next. B, to enter in a new cell, and then we're going to call this output directory equal to, and then we're going to call it segment files. Okay, Control Enter to execute the cell. Let's scroll down just a bit here. And now what we want to do is we want to be able to determine if we do create a new directory, we want to check to see if it does exist. And if it doesn't, it will create it. So we want to enter in code to do that. So let's go over here. Create, okay, so that code in Python, we're going to use an if statement. If not os.path dot exists, and then we're going to pass it the output, the directory name, which is here. We're going to use a variable and then pass that in. Let's close out that, and then underneath it, so let's see, if not, okay, and then os dot make directories DRIS, okay, output directory. So in other words, what this code is doing, it's using the OS module, and it's going to come over here and use a method called exists. And what the whole purpose of that is, it's going to check whether or not this directory, so the value of this variable is right now set to segment files. So what that is, we're using a not indicator, and that tells you if it doesn't exist, let's go ahead and make it. So that's what the make ders method function does. So let's press Control Enter. Okay, let's we need to enter in a colon here at the end. Okay, and then from there, what we want to do is then we want to be able to read in um, the file into our data frame. In other words, we want to read in the Excel file and create a data frame. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's B, enter. Let's go ahead and call it just simplicity. I'm calling it DF for data frame. And then PD read Excel, and then Excel underscore file. Remember, this variable name was created above, and it contains the actual file name that we're going to be working with. So now let's go ahead and then let's enter. And so I'm going to recall the variable name data frame, so we display what's in the data frame. So you could see that it read it incorrectly. So give it a few seconds because it is 9,800 rows. So as you can see, it read in the file and it read in everything over here. Let's go over, scroll to the right. So it read in all the columns that we want. So let's scroll back. Okay. And now after this, what we want to do is get a unique set of the values that exist in the segment column. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's scroll down. Let's go to this cell. Let's create a new cell, B. And then I'll show you or exactly tell you what's happening here. Let's type in the code, unique is equal to, okay, your data frame. And then we're going to pass it in a list, or basically in this case, the segment column. So what do we want to access? We want to access the segment column in the Excel file. So segment, remember we set this as a variable above with the value of the exact column name in the Excel file. And when you do a DF data frame and then pass it in double brackets, that you're just telling Python to say, hey, we want to access this column. So now we want to type in unique and then close that out and then enter. And then I want to show you the results of unique segments so you get a good visual of what's happening here. Control enter. So as you can see, it brings back an array and it brought back the exact 3 values that exist in the Excel file for that particular column. So it brought back all the unique values, consumer, corporate, and home office. So that's what we want. So the next step is, or basically, it's a little bit longer code, and we want to iterate through each one of these unique values. And then as we grab that value, what we want to do is then be able to filter the data frame based upon the current value that we're going to be doing it. So we're going to be using the for loop basically in Python. But before we get to that, I want to show you what that particular code will be doing. So first of all, we want to get each unique value of the array or list of unique segments that is assigned to the segment variable. Again, I'm stepping forward just a bit, but I want to show you something here. So let's go ahead and let's see. Let's create unique. Okay, just a second. B. Okay. So part of this for loop code will show you this. Let's do data frame. I'm going to access the segment column. And then let's see, we want to close that out. We want to check whether or not a certain segment exists. So in this particular case, I'm just going to hard code it and I'm going to say it's going to be consumer. So I'm going to copy and paste this. And then what we want to do is I want to show you what's happening here. So I'm going to go ahead and execute this cell. Okay, so what it brings back a Boolean series. Now it goes through the entire data set. Let's go back to Excel file. So it goes through this data set, right now it's in memory in the data frame in Python. and it checks whether or not the current row is equal to consumer. If it is, it'll bring back a Boolean value of true. If it isn't, it will bring back a Boolean value of false. So let's go back over here to see what is happening. So you can see what's happening. So the first two rows are true. The third row basically is false. So let's go back to the Excel file. And as you can see, the first two rows are consumer. So that should be true and this should be false. So let's go back over here. And so that's the first part. Now the second part to this is, let's go to the next cell and I'm going to show you what will be happening next. The next thing is once it creates a Boolean series for this, we now need to filter this Boolean series, okay? And we're going to be doing that based upon whether or not the value in each one of these rows here are true. And we're only going to bring back the true values. So let's go ahead and I'm going to show you the code that it's doing that for. So it's basically, you're going to wrap it again with double brackets. That's all you're doing. So I'm going to copy and paste this. Let's do that. And then close that out. And then Control Enter. And this is how it looks now. Okay, again, you'll see this code in a second once we go through the for loop. So basically what it did was, by taking the data frame again and wrapping it in double brackets with this code right here, it first executes this. It creates a separate Boolean series with trues and falses. And then once it gets to this point, it's going to create a filter and only bring back the values in this series of true values. So as you can see, if I scroll down, you'll see in the segment column, everything here is equal to consumer, and that's what we want. So now let's go back up here and let's finish the code off. Let's see, after this, iterate. So we want to do this here. Let's do this. Okay. B. Now let's do the for loop. So we're going to do a for segment. This is not, segment is just basically a variable name that we're creating for the for loop. In unique segments. Let's spell this right. You need to put a colon at the end, press enter. And then I'm just going to create a separate variable name for the data frame that it returns, equal to, again, we're going to copy this. So I'm going to copy it so you don't have to wait and see me typing it out. Okay, is equal to, but I need to change this now to the variable name of segment, because this variable name is going to equal to, as it goes through the first iteration, it's going to look for consumer because that's the first one in unique segments here. Okay. And now after it grabs that data frame, which is what you saw down here, it's all separated now for the consumer. Okay. Segments. Now we want to create a file name. I'm just creating a variable name called file name, and then we're going to be using the F format string, double quotes, and I pass in, let's see, in curly braces. I'm going to use this segment, and I'll explain this in a second. Lower. Let's close that out, and then underscore. segment dot xlsx, and then in double quotes, and then press enter. And then after we create the file name, we need to give it a file path. Where do we want to store each file name is what this is. So file path is equal to os.path.join output underscore directory, comma, file name. Okay, press enter. And now our last part of this for loop is now once we have the separated data, we created a file name and file path. Now we want to write it out to a new file. So segment underscore data frame, which holds the current segment data, okay, to Excel, which is a pandas method. And we're going to pass in the file path, comma, and then index equal to false. And I'll explain what this means in a second. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this code, and then I'm going to come back and then explain in detail. I already explained this already here. So I'm going to explain a little bit more about this syntax here. So let's press Control Enter. Give it a few seconds. It's creating separate files for 9,800 rows. Now let's see. Output directory, okay, is not defined. So let's go ahead and output directory. Let's go up here. Maybe give me a second. Let's see. Output directory. Control C. Okay, that's that. Give me a second. Let's scroll back down here. Okay, the only thing that I did was I misspelled when we created the variable, I misspelled it above. So that's why I'm getting this is not defined. So let's rerun this code. Okay. Give it a few seconds. So it came back, it executed it. So let's go back over here. This is the directory that it where my original file name exists. So as you can see, it created a directory called segment files. If I double click on it, you can see that it created the separate file names. Again, the file structure that we specified in the script. So it preferences everything by consumer underscore segment, corporate underscore segment, etc. And you can see that it was over here to the right. It shows you when it was last modified, which was just created by the code. So now let's go back over here. Let's walk through this code a little bit more. Okay, let's scroll back up here. So let's first talk about this file name right here. Okay, and why it's important. So let's scroll down here. Let's see, create a filter. Let's file name. So what the F string does, it's a formatted string literal. So you have F, and then in double quotes you pass in a string. So it allows you to embed expressions inside string literals using curly braces. So let's go back up here. So this is what I'm doing. I'm embedding this value right here inside of a string literal. So when Python runs this code, it evaluates this. So the basically the value of this here, the first unique value for segment is consumer. As you can see, it's uppercase. So all I'm doing is I'm taking the value of consumer and applying the lower method to it. Basically, it takes this and makes it all lowercase. It's all it does. So when it evaluates that, it puts consumer, then underscore segment. That will be the name of the file. So let's scroll back down here. And then, so the F before the quote tells Python that the string contains placeholders. Okay, embed expression. So basically that's what it is. And these placeholders will be evaluated at runtime. And again, the lower method converts all uppercase to lowercase. So the next line of code is creating the full file path. So basically what it does, it joins the components of a file path. So let's scroll back up here so we understand this a little bit more. So if we're using an OS module and we're using a join method, and what that does, it takes the output directory, which we created above, the name of the output directory is right here. It's called segment files. And that's the name of the directory that's going to store all these individual files with. So let's go back here, and then so it takes that file path, which it consists of the file directory, okay, segment files, and then it appends the name of the file to that. So that's the full file path that it does. And then once it creates that file path, we're going to go to the next line of code. And all this is doing is taking that segmented data frame that we created above here or down here. This is the segmented data frame, which consists only of that current segment that we're running in the for loop. And then it writes it out to the file. It creates a new file. So that's what 2XL does. And the index is equal to false, meaning that the data frame normally has, if I exclude the index from this parameter from this, what it would do in the file, and you'll see it in a second, the output file, you'll see it will create a separate column in Excel with the index of the data frame, just like what you're seeing here, a sequential index that appends a new column in the Excel file. But I set it to be false, so which means that it's not going to include this index. It's just going to write out all these variables here. So as you can see down here, so this is a data frame. So it's going to write to the output file all these column names here and exclude what you see here, the index of the data frame. So let's now navigate. Okay, here it is. Here's the subdirectory called segment files, and here's the individual files that it all created. So let's just go to the first one. And as you can see, give me a second, this is the original file. Here's the segmented file. So as you can see, it did not create a separate column for the index, which is what we didn't want, but it created all the column names and the segmented data. So let's go over here, Control-Shift-L. Let's go up here, select that, Alt down arrow, and as you can see, the only values that exist in this particular column is consumer. So let's scroll down here. Let's close out of this. I'm not going to save it. Let's go back over here. Let's go to Home Office, open it up. And as you can see here, Control-Shift-L, Alt down arrow, and as you can see, the only values that exist in this column is Home Office. So as you can see, by using Python and Excel, you could go into Excel from Python and extract the data that you want and create new files by it. And then at this point, once you have the new files, then you can email those off to the proper person to evaluate. Maybe that's the person who's in charge of this particular segment, which is home office sales. So hopefully this tutorial gave you an idea of what you could do as a data analyst, and when you're given a project, how you can integrate both Python and Excel together. I want to thank you for stopping by today. Hopefully you learned something new. And please subscribe to the channel, and also please like and comment on this video. I want to thank you again. Have a great day, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye now.